Welcome to a brand spanking new episode of Who Do You Think You Are? An exploration into how our thoughts, beliefs, and feelings create our reality. My name is Lastia Cahoot and I'm your host. I'm joined by my co-host on this show and in life, Glenn Sheridan. Every episode, we're joined by a special guest who inspires us to consider not only what we think, but how we think and how that thinking impacts our life experience. It's time to get this conscious conversation started as we ask today's guest, who do you think you are? Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Who Do You Think You Are? My name is Lastia and I am your host. And once again, as always, I'm here with my co-host on this show and in life, Mr. Glenn Sheridan, somewhere.
Hello, everyone.
And today we have another super special guest that we are really looking forward to hanging out with. We wanted to have her on the show for a long time, and today is finally the day. But just before we get started, I would like to say thank you. We are so infinitely grateful to be coming to you from Saanich here on Vancouver Island, where we live, work, breathe, and play on the unceded lands of the Wasanich people. We are so grateful to be here in these times, in this amazing, amazing place, on this beautiful day, in this now moment. Thank you.
Hi, Chika.
So here is a little bit about our guest today. She is super versatile in a variety of musical genres. She is a dynamic and well-stylized guitarist and vocalist. Let's see, where did we meet her? We met her a few years ago when she was performing with her parents, who are also incredible musicians, at the Center for Spiritual Living Victoria, and soon after became friends with her because she's just so super groovy and is the bee's knees. She grew up in Victoria. Her parents are musicians. Her brother is a musician, and she has a deeply rooted foundation and love for music. She's lived in Montreal. She got a diploma in jazz studies in Victoria, and she also spent a summer in Nashville as an artist in residence, where she honed her songwriting skills. She has also traveled and worked at sea on boutique cruise ships, having been part of a small handpicked entertainment team with Seabourn Cruise Lines. And more recently, in 2019 and 2020, she spent 4 months in the Canadian Rockies performing as a solo act 6 nights a week for the Fairmont Hotels. She wrote this amazing last line in her bio: she adores animal companions of varying character and really loves hot dogs. Now, I'm also going to add that she was Milana's first vocal coach after we moved here to the island. She is just an amazing, amazing singer-songwriter. I love listening to her sing and play. I love the clarity and richness of her voice. And I love her as a person because she is just so, in addition to being super lovely and chill and easygoing, she is also one of the most curious people I know. And so I love having conversations with her. I love how she just is so present during our conversations and time together. And I love that we have been immersed in music together. We have cooked together. We have hung out together. And here we are today online having a conscious conversation that is already bubbling up with super amazing things making their way forward. So without further ado, knowing there's so much more to come, Danielle Lebeau Petersen, tell us, who do you think you are?
Thank you so much, Lastia. It's I feel very humbled by your introduction. It's really beautiful, and I just feel lucky to be loved. It's such a I think it's the thing that everybody is constantly like looking for, just like just seeking, and so thank you so much for that. And the first thing, it's a funny, I'm gonna tell you something that I believe it's quite unexpected, because the first thing that actually comes to mind is a Jerry Halliwell song.
Okay.
You know who Jerry Halliwell is? Do you know who she is?
I know the name, but I don't know. Glenn knows. Yeah, he's
Spice
nodding.
Girls. Yeah.
She is one of the Spice Girls.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
She is.
I did not see this coming.
Yeah, she is former Ginger Spice.
Okay. Yep.
Potentially my favorite. I don't know. It's why choose a favorite Spice Girl? I mean, we could just spend time on your podcast just exploring that question. But um, she has this wonderful, really sassy song. Oh, actually, no. I'm so sorry. You know what? It's actually a Spice Girls song. I'm mixing it up, but it's just I often think in song lyrics.
Yep.
Like
Right.
if you my brain is just like, it almost feels like it's just peppered with lyric, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate and in love with lyrics. And so I have this lyric that soars through my head. It's like, who do you think you are? And it's kind of joyous, and it's a little bit inquisitive. It's a bit, I would say, almost like a bit cocky. Um, so that's actually what I think of when you ask me that song. But to digress, I think I'm just showing you a little bit about how my brain works. I think I live personally um, in my head more than I maybe would like to. And a lot of the time, music is happening in my head. I'm digesting songs sometimes, and often they're songs with words in them, and these words um, are kind of communicating to me, and they're bringing up ideas, and they're a lot of the time they're grounding me. Like if I feel like I'm actually not very present, sometimes an earworm will come into my head, and it'll be like a song I didn't dial up inside me, but if I listen to that song, it'll put my attention somewhere. Sometimes it's a song from a certain time of life. Sometimes it's the lyric itself. Sometimes it's this really, really interesting way that I feel like my subconscious um, connects me, or like my conscious mind connects to my subconscious mind.
Right.
So but I'm gonna actually like face the question now, or like, embrace the
Yep.
question. And I mean, it's such a beautiful question and such a big question. um I feel like I'm someone who is almost always trying to like tinker with the way to be as bright and as joyful as I can. And I find this to be very challenging at times. But to do that, to connect to my heart so that I can actually bring that into the world. And it feels, a lot of the times it feels like a puzzle, or it feels like, um, I'm going to use like a big word like Sisyphilian, or like, yeah, like, but sometimes it's so easy, and there's just a lot of mystery to it, I think. Um, I think I'm someone who's very, 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 very lucky to be alive with what I've been given. I feel very privileged. And so I feel privileged with not only just living in this part of the world, but also being given the opportunity to develop my gift and then share it. So I feel like that. I feel very fallible. I also, you know what? I'm noticing something. Um, I'm a deeply feeling person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying I feel and I feel and I feel,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that my thinking is very informed by how I feel, for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes, I think as I mature, I start to become more and more and more aware of how, um, I mean, I think we're generally very similar as humans. I think we're driven by very similar things. Um, However, I also feel and think that not everyone has the same processes as me and like operates the same. And I think that that's something as I mature that I become more and more aware of. It's like, oh, not everyone is like operates in a deeply feeling way. Not everyone relates to words in the same way that I do. Um, yeah, not, it almost makes me think of love languages. Like, not everyone expresses and gives and takes love in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like the driving force.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, yeah, think, I think that scratches the surface. Um, when you like, how come you like this question? Or do you like this question? I mean, I feel like you must like it because you have a podcast about it and you feel like you probably spend a lot of time talking about this question. So I'm assuming you like it, but like what makes you ask this question?
Yeah, that's a great question, Danielle. After I've written a page of notes already, from stuff that you have said, so much to unpack there. No one has asked me that question before, and I haven't answered the question myself. I just keep asking people, "Who do you think you are?" It When we were trying to come up with a title or a name for our podcast, there were many different things that we considered and many variations that we went through. And for the first few weeks, months, whatever, we really were sort of focused on consciousness, being the word consciousness, or the concept of consciousness being the thing around which everything was going to revolve. And so we went through a few different options, and some of them felt good for a time, and some of them, just kind of came and went. And Glenn's were just too esoteric most of the time, and they were like super clever. But I said, like, not enough people are going to understand that. Not enough people are going to get that. There will only be like a teeny tiny percentage. As awesome as it is, we want something that will make people think, and that will just be more accessible in some way. And so really for me, I think it came down to, because I have been steeped in spiritual and consciousness studies for the last 5.5 years, and this is something that we are constantly working on, is who do we think we are versus who we really are. And just that sort of distinction between how our thoughts, beliefs, and feelings impact our life experience, and whether we are continually, sort of choosing to create our life experience based on what is going on around us, the roles that we play, the jobs that we have, the labels that we accept, the expectations that we try to live up to, whether they're ours or others, sort of, feel like others have cast upon us. Versus the infinite expansive universe that we are, versus this incredible universal energy that is the interconnectivity and essence of everyone and everything, versus the driving force of love that you just talked about, that expresses differently through and as everyone, and is felt differently through everyone. So for me, this is just such an amazing question. There's a chapter in my book that's devoted to this question. Which is just, it's a prompt. It's a continual prompt and opportunity to really look at, how am I showing up in life? Am I showing up in this sort of limited scope that is based on these boxes and labels and ideas that, I've sort of glommed onto and have accepted as truth, or even my identity for my life, up until this point? Or am I going to continue to push the boundaries and kick and scream out of my comfort zone, so that I can experience what I'm actually capable of and meant to do in this lifetime, as that infinite expansive universe, as that driving force of love, as whatever you want to call that, you just you know that there is something bigger and more powerful and creative and resilient than you are, you know, compared to what your life has been up until now. So that's, you know, scratching the surface there. Like that's a bit of my answer to
Hmm.
your question.
That's so
And
great. Yeah.
I know that I'm the one who, you know, asked the question, but I'm going to flip it over to Glenn and
Well,
I'm going
my
to,
answer is I
yeah.
don't have any answer to that question.
Oh,
I have more questions that come up, but
oh,
Hmm.
look at you.
no, well, it's such a good prompt, right? I mean, when you're answering it, and like I can see when you're, especially when you got your guitar in front of you, which if you're listening on podcast, you don't know, but she's got a guitar right there. Thank you, Danielle. And musicians have this skill that they have to hone, where they're having to play for time, like if they're waiting for some lighting to change or someone to show up who's not there yet. That's a wonderful skill where you can kind of like stretch things out and like so when you're answering these questions and you're going through the different versions of where from what angle do I come at this question, because it's an infinite kind of, it's kind of a stupid question in a way, right? But it's like it's something to focus on. So
I don't think it's stupid.
when you're answering it, it's like, do I answer with my heart, or because my head is telling me these things? Hey, here's an interesting tidbit, and you mentioned all these things about the song lyrics, and I've got that thing, part of that in myself as well. Um, the whole thing about my, Lasia pointed out, my cleverness with words or whatever. That's one of the reasons I get up in the morning. I like wordplay. It's fun. It's play,
Mm.
and but that's not necessarily why I'm here, right? So it takes a long time in life to realize like I'm here for things that I don't even know yet. What purpose, what interactions with people, being surprised in um, in uncomfortable ways, like things that drag you out of your comfort zone, like into the darkness, so that you can see how your light shines, kind of thing. So that's for me. It's like this question is just, it's like a focusing point. It's something to place your attention on and hopefully relax, and then let everything else come flowing from that, whatever you're paying attention to, that person you're paying attention to, right? So
Hmm.
anyway, that's not really an answer, but
That
It's
sounds like
okay.
an answer to me.
Yeah. I mean, I I like thinking about these things that we're talking about, both of what you said. I mean, um, the like I know what it likes. I know what it's like to feel like I'm kind of like very much um, in harmony in life, or like I'm in my skin. I'm unencumbered, uh, and it feels kind of like sometimes I feel like there's well, I actually believe that we have infinite selves. And sometimes I think it's like um how skilled you are at like picking the self that's like the most um harmonious with its
mm-hmm.
environment. I don't know. I mean, I think these things are really, they are mysterious, but um I think as a human I yearn for that, like that feeling of like of peace and empowerment and ease and um joy. I think that sometimes I'm like, am I entitled to that? Am I supposed to, like, it's like I go back to maybe like, a very Eastern perspective, it's like, well, suffering is just, suffering is life. Oops, suffering is life, and therefore, kind of get used to it.
Mhm.
Like, I feel that that's a narrative that I have interpreted from some uh, Eastern maybe philosophy, um, and I'm not sure if I need to subscribe to that. I'm not sure if it's my Western entitlement that gives me a sense of like, no, like you can be happy a lot of the time. You can feel good. You can choose that. So I think that that's kind of when I go back to my response of like, I feel like I'm constantly tinkering.
Yeah.
Like I'm just like, it's like I've got like this like very complex like moving part thing that's like, oh well, maybe if I push this button like this will happen, and then I'll be able to smile when I really want to. And then like someone else will too, and or maybe I'll, you know sing be able to just say yes when I'm asked of things, when I'm asked to serve, you know. Um, I'm very curious about the operation of like what consciousness is, and the vast like, I think that if people ever ask me about the word God, I mean, I wasn't raised using that word. I don't feel terribly afraid of that word or super opposed to it. I don't think it's really my word,
Hmm.
but I would say like, if someone would say, "What's your word for God?" I would say it's the vast pool of consciousness.
Mm.
Like it's just, and so like understanding what that is, um, and how to really work it. you
So,
know?
it, see, oh, wow, this is splitting into different things here for me. So, when you when you're answering that, when you're saying those things, and you're pointing out how you're noticing how you um, are, you're not at war with yourself, but you're noticing you have like this flow of perspectives of, life is suffering, or suffering is life, as you said. Um, who am I to kind of stand up and say, I'm different? And then you've got this other part that says, well, look, when you're playing, when you are at play, when you're joyful, when you're experiencing life to the full, there's only that really, because in the background there might be other things that are potential suffering, but you're in that moment of pure fun and ecstasy and joy, right? Um, so that just means that's where you are, right? And that's who you are in that moment. And then the other stuff falls away, but then it may come back in, as we all experience that, Um, but that word God, like as you bring that thing up, is like, I think to my ears now, it's becoming more obvious that um, there's the question with that, like, what do you mean by God? Like one God, or the gods that used to be for many people? There were many gods. Each spirit had a god. Each archetype kind of thing had a god. Each event, like the crops, they had their own god. So you prayed for the best for that experience to get through the winter. We would have enough food, we would have shelter. So, but we're in the West, and the word God is generally in the air as like the monotheistic idea of like, yeah, one God. And Lassie and I talk a lot about this whole thing of like one consciousness and all that. But God, for many people still, they put the word God in a box to mean like a single identity, like one. So therefore, like, what does that mean? Like, is that a God that you pray to? Is that separate from you? Um, or is it, as we sort of more believe, it's part of us, or we are part of it. But I also like the pagan and the indigenous cultures ideas of many gods, because it's in India, like you you light a candle to whatever you feel inspired to connect with in that day, and it might be a statue of Jesus, or it might be um,
A Spice
Shiva
Girl.
or whatever. Yeah, so it's it's like, what's going on with you? Well, I got to go and light a candle. I got to like light some incense and be with
Hmm.
that experience. But it's an interesting thing because we're in the West, and it's like we're doing things a little bit differently, but we also have the sort of luxury of like combining everything, um, and like picking and choosing. Like we're at Costco and just like going down the aisles and like have a little bit of that. I can do that next week, but right now I don't need it. So
Yeah. I mean, I have this, I have a sense of like the, mm, the West being some, I don't know, being like, when you talk about, is it what it like monotheism and like systems where there were many gods, like I find it really interesting to contemplate those entities as though they were embodied, like they were like um people or half animal people, like they were kind of things we could conceptualize as something like us.
Mm-hmm.
um
yeah.
and why I think love the term for me, the vast pool of consciousness, is because it actually like it is faceless.
Mm-hmm.
It's energetic,
Mm-hmm.
and there's something very like, for me, very very true. There's something that I can only say like for me, I know this. I
Okay.
I I know something, and I don't think it means actually it's different from anybody else's narrative.
Hmm.
It actually just means I have ideas and I have a story that aligns with me,
Mm-hmm.
and this is how I can tell my story to you. I can say, I remember one of my first spiritual concepts as a young person that I like felt like I knew, and it wasn't attached, it wasn't culturally ascribed to anything, but it was this idea of reincarnation.
Hmm.
And I actually don't think like I incarnate, like I don't think like it's like there's going to be another person necessarily. Maybe there will, maybe there won't. Actually, I'm not too focused on that, but I do know that energetically, I like my energy has intelligence. I think that there's like something about my energy that when it will leave this meat suit, um, will like, it's gonna go somewhere, and it will carry on. There's a culture. There is some kind of culture in me that carries on, um, and it feels almost like liquid to me. Like that's why I say like the pool of consciousness. I almost feel like if I were to give you imagery, it's like I feel like I'm like my spiritual essence is liquid, and then it just like it got poured into this, and then it's going to get poured back into something else, and then that's going to mix around with something, and it'll get poured into something else. So um and I think that's exciting. When I think of that, I find it feels very exciting to me because it feels true, and it also feels infinite, um
Hmm.
in a way that life truly feels infinite to me. And when I can speak like this, it's I find it really playful and fun to speak like this because it actually removes me from, it feels very like high vibration,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and it helps me to think, like helps me to think about low vibration fear that I contend with, that on a daily basis. you know and it's like, I think it's like, oh, okay, it's like, but you don't have to be afraid of dying. And you know something just as a is a huge idea. like just to really bring it home there.
Yeah.
Take it to the max as a metaphor.
I am loving just listening to you. Like I almost like don't even want to ask you questions and stuff because there's just this incredible wisdom and just like that curiosity that is one of the things that I love about you so much is just like as you're talking and I can sort of like see the windmills of your mind kind of working as they're sort of processing what they know, but then there's this air flow coming in, and then as you're talking about the imagery of this vast pool of consciousness and the essence being liquid pouring into something and then mixing with something else and pouring into something else, and it it's so rich and so, I mean, I think that it's something that a lot of people could relate to. But I haven't heard this described by someone in this way before. And so I'm just loving listening to you talk and tinker and question as you're talking and just be open to whatever it is that is coming up, but still have sort of this grounding idea that you find to be true and feels good for you, that opens you up to the infinitude that you are, which helps you in times of when you're not feeling that way, when you're in the low vibration of fear that you were just talking about. So it's just, it's beautiful and it's so rich and it's so simple too. um it's lovely. And I mean, there's so many things that you've said that thinking, oh, I'd like to talk about that, I'd like to talk about that, but you kind of just keep going on, and I don't know if there's anything to like go back to, just to keep going forward. Because and the thing that came to mind was, as I'm listening to you think, it reminds me of when you or a guitarist might noodle on a guitar while just not necessarily playing a tune, but just sort of like playing. And it's almost like that's what I'm experiencing, as I'm or listening to you and watching you as you're just thinking your way through, whatever it is that is just coming from you. And everything that you say just sort of opens up to more curiosity and more questions. And even though Glenn said earlier that he didn't have an answer, just more questions, I think even in that answer, whatever, I mean, it just, I know that, when I give a response to something, it's not the end all be all and that it will never change. Like for me, everything is changing all the time. There's no, I mean, just very recently, like have learning that there's no objective reality that is taking place without me in it. um that the universe is rebooting itself anew every single moment, which means that I am brand new. And those infinite selves that you were talking about earlier on in the conversation, when you said that, I mean, I know that Glenn, nodded his head and he resonated with that. And that's something that I resonate with too, that there are like it's infinite, we are infinite. And the reason that we are having this experience right here right now in this moment, which is brand new every moment, is because that's what we're choosing to focus on. But kind of like you said, you know we can focus on something else, we can like leap into another trajectory and experience something at any time. Don't necessarily know how to do that all the time, but how cool is it that that's what's happening, and that we have this opportunity to just experience something different and new, and that we're constantly growing and that we're constantly evolving in ways that we don't even understand or comprehend, but to just be open to that fluidity of that vast pool of consciousness that is just pouring itself through each and every one of us. um, it's so exciting to me. So I'm just loving listening to you right now.
Aw,
So thank
it's so,
you.
yeah, that's so wonderful. Thank you. I mean, I, it's like, I think that's, when you're describing that feeling, it's like, that's the feeling. It's like, if I could stay in that feeling with people around me all the time, That would be my preference. But like, and I wonder about that, and I think, how come we have experiences where we're not like that? Like, it's almost, I think, someone I love to listen to, partly just because of the the rhythm of her voice. I find it extremely soothing, is Tara Brach. Um, and her description of being in trance, and being not in trance, is something that I feel like could be very much a part of this conversation for me, because going back to that tinkering thing, it's like when I'm here with you and Glenn, and we can have this conversation, and it feels rich, and it feels exciting, and it feels safe, and it feels kind of like I'm not existing in fear right now. I'm not thinking about so many things I could think about. I mean, it seems like within reach, there are so many things to feel grief about right now. And I think that's even an important human process as well. It's not like I'm trying to say that I only want to live and eat sugar all day, or you know, um, but being in this kind of moment with you guys, it's like how it seems like that actually is possible to do, and like be with each other, and be and listen and be in agreement and not be afraid.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of like, and that's like not being in trance.
Yeah.
And so it's like I think that someone, like, to go back to your original question, it's like I am someone who is constantly trying to not be in trance. be in
Okay.
the trance, be in the illusion of fear and pain.
Wow, that's interesting because the word trance to me, and again, I've heard interviews with Tara Brach, and she's very interesting and obviously very grounded and everything. And but the word trance for me, I thought you were going to say like as in going really, really deep in meditation,
Right.
whereas you just flipped it back upside down for me. It's like that, yeah,
Well,
that's the other kind of trance that is not helpful, right? Is like being only focused on one thing without agency and just getting sucked into something that's not necessarily good for anyone, right?
yeah, I think it's almost like maybe I could better say, like, the way I'm associating that word right now, because words, I feel, are flexible
Yeah,
and
yeah,
have different
totally.
connotations. I think words are alive.
Yeah,
And I think words are so exciting in that they do grow and change. Like, they they aren't, they, just like Glacia said, like, everything is in motion. I think of, yeah, it's like we're constantly on a highway with everything. Everything's just churning.
Mhm.
Um, but that the when I say trance, I think I am associating it with, um, just the grip of, like it's like I can sit here and I can just think of, like, so many things that could scare me, and then, like, immobilize me, bring me down. But actually it's like, or I could just not. I could fantasize about like a different kind of life, and actually, like, it's just the amazingness of the mind and how powerful it is. But that trance state, the word trauma also seems to come up, because I feel like, um, the way I'm describing trance almost feels like maybe like a processing of trauma, or a
okay.
healing from trauma. And and how, like, you know maybe I'll just use a simple example of, like, getting criticized within a workplace situation, or a simple criticism from someone who might have the authority to, change
Right.
your job. And then how most people in that situation are so deeply threatened by
Mhm.
it. Like, it's really hard. And I absolutely include myself. And at the same time, like if I could pan back and just look at like, just be like, that person just like told me to like get to work a little earlier, or like, you know, maybe wear slightly different clothing, or
Mhm.
it's like I think sometimes like a response can just be so big, and that's what I would like an example of being in trance. It's like
Mhm.
Right.
actually that trance was more about like that threatens my identity, that I don't feel secure, I feel like I, you know, my livelihood is in question, I don't feel accepted and loved in my tribe, I don't feel like I have community, I don't feel seen, I don't feel loved, I don't feel, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the trance I'm talking about.
You mentioned earlier about it's you don't have to, I think you said you don't have to fear dying, like you don't, right? And you're not the first person to say that on this podcast, but you not many people have said it, but you're second or maybe third. And that's really important. Like that's one of my grounding things is like I'm not. However, you know, if it's death by 1,000 cuts, it's like, you know, that's a lot of to go through, right? That's a lot of
Yeah.
um, band-aids and just processing and all that. Like as you said, you know, you could be hit by an asteroid tomorrow and whatever. And but at the same time, it's like your thoughts would be in that same morning. It's like I still got to get to work and get my lunch and get on the bus, and um,
Hmm.
we get focused on these patterns of, you know, this is the important thing to do. But yeah, I just it's a weird time because as on the one hand, I've been hearing for 30 years people saying, you know, there's a shift in consciousness, right? There's
Hmm.
an age of, you know, Pisces into Aquarius, whatever. It's like there's a huge shift, but at the same time, we're still not ready for what's going on because like shift means there's going to be rapid change, and it will speed up so much that you think you won't be able to handle it. And things like that are going on, but it's the same time at the same time it's still like, well, what's happening in me, because that's actually what's happening out there. That's really
And
what's going on, I think, is what is the we're experiencing the reflection of our own um, awareness and consciousness, our own lens on what truly we're putting out, like our light in the world or whatever. It's like that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the flickering and the images from our own candle, and we think like, oh, that's what's going on, but really it's we're only part of it. Like it's part of who we are, right? So, Lassia, rescue me because I'm getting
it's okay.
rambled here.
No,
You're
again,
fine.
I'm really like, this is one of those times, excuse me, where I'm just really enjoying listening. And I mean, one of the things that happens when we're doing the podcast, I'm taking notes constantly and I'm paying attention to what people are saying to sort of, you know, guide the conversation as it's unfolding. And then when I go back to listen later, as I'm doing a little bit of editing at the you know, at the front and at the end, I hear things that I didn't hear because I wasn't
Mm.
fully present, because I was, you know, trying to pay attention. One of you might need to talk though, because I'm probably going to cough some more because I swallowed my
Okay.
green juice wrong.
Oh, no. No problem. Well, yeah, it's it's pretty interesting to like even just going back to what you said, like Glenn, like the when I was speaking just like kind of offhandedly about like oh I'm like to not be afraid of dying, and then you bring up, well, there's different ideas of that, like, you know, maybe you could have a very painful death or a protracted death or something, all this, and it's like actually in those situations I just think we adapt. Like in like I know my mother, I can tell about certain things about my parents because I'm quite close to them and I can see like some of their particular anxieties. And one thing I think that I've observed from my mother is she's she seems very anxious about maybe developing Alzheimer's at some point. Right? it's not prominent in our family or anything, but I can tell it's just something she thinks about. And
Mhm.
she's like, oh, I can't remember this thing. It's like, oh my gosh, is this early onset? Da, 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 da. And I just go, yeah, like I know friends of mine who have parents who they're dealing with this issue with. I can see how it's hard for them. I can see different people dealing with it in different ways, relating to it in different ways. And I just also think it's pretty amazing. Like I'm like, I mean, clearly this is a subject I'm not informed on. Um, but I use it as an example to speak about what we maybe are fearing. It's like maybe there are some, I feel like I've experienced some people who are experiencing this condition who are quite joyful
Mhm.
and like aren't in a lot of pain, aren't in a lot of psychological pain. And it's like, and that even kind of brings me back to like myself when I go like, how graceful can I be at any point in my life? How much can I like how accessible is um is a place of harmony and joy and pleasure and like light? Is it right there all the time? I actually think it might be. Um, but it's like it's not an easy thing to always come back to, especially um, you know, if we're in pain, in pain of different kinds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I oh gosh, there's so many things to address and just bear, but
How's that green juice?
it's yeah, it's good. And I just, I'm thinking about the fear of dying, and I think the thing that just jumps out at me the most out of everything you said in the last few minutes was we adapt. And it took me, like, I wrote down fear of dying, and then Glenn's thing of death by 1,000 cuts, and how maybe that's not the preference. But I I I really feel like we adapt is the important part there. And I agree with you, because we are sort of very simply and sort of, relatively, we're hardwired to survive. And so the body and the mind and it just, like, it's going to do whatever it can do to survive, to make it through. And when we think in terms of, I too, I feel I am not afraid to die. I also feel like I have a whole lot of living left to do, and that there's work that I have to do, and there are ways to serve that I have not yet, been of service in. But for me, that's not one of the fears that I entertain. Um, However, when I think of dying, I think that I had to do an exercise when I was in my first year of spiritual practitioner studies. We had to plan our memorial service, as Dr. James said,
Mhm.
from soup to nuts. And so we had to say, decide when we were going to die, how we died, and then what our memorial service or celebration of life was going to be like from the opening moment until the very end. And so I thought about it a lot. And for me, like, I just feel like I'm living to at least a vibrant 120. It's not about living long, it's about living a full, engaging, fulfilling, vibrant life. And for me, 120 just seemed like a super amazing number, but vibrant. And then whatever else is after that, that's just bonus time, right? However, like, I have a preconceived notion of what I want that life to be like, and I have a preconceived notion of what I want my death to be like. And that preconceived notion is because of where I am now and what I have thought and experienced up until now. But if I were to, sort of open myself up through meditation or mindfulness, or something I haven't done up until now, to sort of tune in to the infinite possibilities of what my life could look like, up until 120, and what my death could look like, that's different, sort of doing it from this moment where I am now, than actually being there, having lived, sort of, even though life is not linear according to quantum physics, but having lived a life of 120 years. And so for me, this idea of we adapt, I will have adapted, by the time I get to that 120. And if it ends up turning out that it's by 1,000 cuts, or something in between, super vibrant, and I drop dead doing something I love, to, agony and pain or whatever, I will have adapted along the way. And what I think would be agonizing and death by 1,000 cuts, from today's standpoint, could look and feel very different by the time I get there. Does that make any sense? Am I just like
No,
like,
I feel
whatever?
like you're, yeah, no, it's really cool because um, I feel like the work you've done, like it's like when you talk to me about that kind of uh, exploration in consciousness and spirituality, I go, wow, that's so cool that you've spent that time doing that for yourself. And when you share it with me, I feel like I benefit from it. And I'm like, oh, could I do that? I could probably do that. I mean, I could probably be like, I mean, I could think about how I want to exit. I think people have, I've heard stories of this, and I've heard it's like, you can do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you can do it, like, why wouldn't you?
Yep.
It's just because it's like, it's almost like there's so many ways to spend our time,
Yeah.
take our awareness, and it's like our awareness is ours. It's our
Yep.
gift. And so it's like, what do you want to do with it?
Yep.
And that's really, I think it's wonderful to hear about that you've spent time doing that, and that, yeah, and that you're contemplating, um that you're almost like contemplating how awareness, like almost like an echo chamber, like it comes back to you.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, like, well, it's like, okay, so if I'm there and I'm here, then what happens when I'm here? It's like, just, I think the contemplation of it is kind of what develops it even further.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you there. And I just like, this is awareness, I just think is key, because when we're not aware, then we're just kind of fumbling along through life. Things may feel good, they may not, but we we don't know why. And once we become aware of what's going on, in our minds, how we use our minds, and how we are showing up in life, whether, it's creating it from circumstances and experiences and memories, and the familiarity of what we've lived up until now, or whether it's from that vast pool of consciousness that is just so fluid all the time. That is incredibly powerful. That is incredibly empowering, which is another word you used earlier in the conversation. But it can also be terrifying for some people to think that, oh my God, like, you mean I'm responsible for creating my life experience, not some entity or force or, big puppeteer pulling the puppet strings kind of thing. um, that can be huge and a really challenging shift for some people to make, because it's just too much responsibility all of a sudden. um, so that, like, when I talk to people about that, I've met people sort of, on both sides, and kind of, in the middle, and going back and forth. I know people in my life who are like, no, I for me, it works to know that there is a God, which is the word that they like to use, that is in charge of me, and that I can pray to that God, that I can ask that God for stuff, and that works for me. And if it works for them, then great.
Mm.
Um, for me, what just blew my mind was when I discovered that I could shape my life experience based on how I use my mind.
Mm.
And the more I trained my mind, and the more aware I became of the thoughts, beliefs, and stories and feelings that had been just like running on autopilot, or this recorded loop for so long. Like, I had to become aware of them first
Mhm.
in order to shift, in another direction. But once I did, life just changed. Like it just, and it's an ongoing evolution, because even when I achieve things, when I attain things, when I become more of what it is that I have been endeavoring to become, there's always more. Like it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, it's constantly fluid. um
Mhm.
there's this one little thing that I want to say, because it kind of made me laugh in my head, which is not to like laugh at your mom, because your mom is awesome. And her fears or her anxieties, whatever, like are real to her, right? But my mom, who we've talked about numerous times on this show, and she's never watched an episode, and I'm like, oh my god, one of these days she's going to watch one. It's like, what are you talking about me? But she it's not like it's like total secrets. She also, getting Alzheimer's is kind of one of her, fears. And so she does Sudoku, she does crossword puzzles. She could probably eat a little better, more of an anti-inflammatory diet and brain healthy diet. But she does what she can, what she thinks is going to help her to not get Alzheimer's. Um, and so that's one of the things she does, even though it's not something that runs in our family.
Mhm.
But the thing that really sort of made me laugh was she has this thing where every now and then she's like, oh, so and so doesn't like me, so and so is mad at me, so and so, just something like that. And there
Yeah.
was one time when she was talking about my sister, and she's just like, oh, you know what, your sister doesn't love me, she hates me, whatever. And I just thought, I'm like, okay. And I said, well, mom, what if she does? And she's like, you can't say that. And I'm like, well, what if she did though? Like, this is what you talk about constantly. And it just completely, just like, it shifted her right away. It's like, you can't tell that story anymore. Like, just, like, just enough of it. This woe is me kind of thing. But to call her on it, it was like, I could go like, oh no, she doesn't. And, whatever. It's like, okay, but what if she did?
That
Yep.
that are we allowed to shout out your mom's name?
Yes.
Okay. Shout out Connie. We love you.
We do love you, Connie.
Please remember that at least. What about the MCT oil? That isn't that like the kind of cure oil thing? Oh, cure oil.
You need to take a lot of it, honey bunch. It is
Did
great. Medium chain fatty acids. They're really, really good. But essentially, I mean, there's so many things you can do in, on the relative plane. But no matter what you do, if you are convinced that you are going to
yeah.
get Alzheimer's, and that's the belief, that you are functioning or operating from, that subconscious belief is going to continue to get in the way and continue to, sabotage whatever other conscious plans you engage in to try and not get it.
Yeah. It's pretty, that's pretty wild too. I mean, we haven't even spoken about like, you know, the physical, how like, how consciousness, like how your thoughts then affect your body,
Mm-hmm.
like the functioning of your body.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Like, which is another thing I'm just kind of like, well, I'm doing my best to maintain this thing. I can tell it's not perfect. I can tell I'm not on all the time. I can really tell, but maybe being able to tell is just, a step in the right direction.
And that actually reminds me, going back to, I thought about it a while ago, was that it's not a, and this is something that I constantly am reminded of, and sometimes need to be reminded by Glenn or my prayer partners, or I'll read something, that it's not a this or that situation. It's not a, I'm aligned and I'm tuned in and I'm, a spiritual being having a spiritual existence in a spiritual universe, or I'm not. It's, you're always that. Like when you said earlier, it's how did you say it, the joy and the harmony. How accessible is a place of harmony, joy, and light? Is it there all the time? I think it might be, I totally believe that. I totally believe that we are the infinite expansive universe in and at play all the time. Sometimes our focus, our attention might stray, but we're never not who we are. And
Mhm.
and so, even in those special occasions, or on those special occasions when we forget and our attention strays, or we shift, or we lower, to a vibration of fear, anxiety, overwhelm, whatever, we're still that infinite expansive universe. We're still that, vast pool of consciousness, just flowing beautifully. We're just kinking the flow. We're just, as in the sort of the human experience that we're having, that's part of our growth, that's part of our evolution, I think.
I'm I'm sensing that Danielle is really going to step up and grace us with a song in a moment, which I'm really looking forward to.
Oh,
But
is
before we
that what
get
you'd like?
um, that thing of, is it possible? Is it available? Um, my first thought was, well, it is, like the sun comes up every day. And then the second thought was, no, the sun's there all the time. We're just turning away from it every day. And then we turn back towards it, and, from different angles. It's, it's always like it's ever present. And the sun is such a great, like, embodiment of all of these principles of, you know, light, the typical visual light, and also lightness, and warmth and love and energy. And it's just infusing everything on earth. It's an amazing representation of all these things that we kind of aspire to. So anyway, write a song in your head, 30 seconds. You'll figure it out. There's something. Sorry. Anything that does that spark anything to, like, in the songs that you've written, or um
Well, I mean, I actually like songwriting isn't an easy thing for me. Um, and I'd love to even just retract that, because I want it to be an easy thing. Maybe it hasn't been easy for me in the past. I feel like in the past I have um, found it challenging to just have the confidence
mm,
to have a voice and um, put my words to music and feel like it's good enough. Um, and I think that in the past, these ideas have been very, very limiting, and perhaps even just an arena for me to learn how to just shine and learn how to love myself and just let myself do it, no, regardless of any fear I have.
Mhm.
In the past, this has been a very charged thing for me, and rationally speaking, or when I can try and remove myself from it, I think it's kind of funny um, how scary it can be for me. It's like, what? Like, you know, you're not killing someone at the moment. Like, if you write a song that isn't perfect, you're not like,
mm,
yeah, it's not life or death. But that aside, I I think songwriting, it's not as though I have done a lot of intentional songwriting, or like, like I'm gonna write a song about this. It's like I just kind of have taken what I could get and allowed myself to do. And a lot of the songs that I play that are mine are quite old at this point in my life.
Mhm.
Um, there's a song that I'm thinking of playing for you, and I'm guessing this is the moment. Is this the moment?
Sure, yeah, this I
Yeah.
think I think it's
um,
happening.
yeah, and it's very connected to some of the music that has been a big part of my life and my family's life, and just what I've understood about. Just I feel like the cloth I've come from in the past, and I think you've heard it before. I'm just going to tune my guitar one more time before I get started. Yeah, and it's I mean, I would say it's pretty subjective. And without describing it too much, maybe I'll just launch into it so that it can be experienced.
Let's mute.
So this song is called Falling Rain. There is something about these walls tonight, they feel farther away. Like if I cast a stone across it would only reach halfway. I've been purging this October, getting rid of a lot of stuff. Like all my funny looking clothes I can't wear at my new job. But I'm not lonely, I'm not hurt. I'm coming home from a hard day's work. Nothing to say, nobody to say it to. Just the sound of falling rain from my window coming through. My apartment's like a skeleton, like a highway at sun up. And the driver that's inside of me likes the space and just speeds up. With the mamas and the papas on the radio and their tapestry of song. If everybody sang like them, I might believe them when they say nothing's wrong. And if my name were Carole King, if I lived in New York, I would write and sing about everything by the time I reach the second verse. I'm not lonely, I'm not hurt, I'm coming home from a hard day's work with nothing to say, nobody to say it to. Just the sound of falling rain from my window coming through. Tomorrow is election day. The dollar's been cut in half. Everybody's gonna be looking up at Alaska and trying to do the math. And my brother, he's coming home from tour at the end of tomorrow's day. We'll be talking about the road and the business till we're barely awake. He won't be lonely, he won't be hurt. He's gonna put down all his bags and reach for a clean shirt. He'll have lots to say. Yeah, we're gonna laugh until we're blue. Oh, I'm not lonely and I'm never hurt. Coming home from a hard day's work. Nothing to say, nobody to say it to. Just the sound of falling rain from my window coming through.
you. I don't think I have heard that one before.
Oh, I think you have.
Really?
Because I only have like a few songs that I play.
Oh my God. There's two that I know for sure that I've heard several times.
Mhm.
But that one just doesn't ring anyway. Thank you. Okay,
Mhm.
Honey Bunch, you are the one who pays so much more. And I was really trying hard to pay attention to lyrics, but you hear lyrics a million times more clearly and more quickly and just more profoundly than I do. So I'm gonna defer to you to speak.
To what? To pick apart a perfect song? What?
No, not to pick
Oh
apart a perfect
no,
song,
he
but like
doesn't even.
what did you get out of that? What did you hear?
Well, I like that you evoke the that time. Someone was saying that this to me the other day. There's a certain um, I lived through the 70s as a young boy
Mhm.
into the 80s and even the 90s is when I really started to discover the music of the 60s and 70s, right? So Mamas and the Papas, Carole King, Tapestry. Um, there's a certain kind of like amazing groundedness to the lightness of the music that they had. Like they're I mean, especially with Carole King, that one iconic album cover where it's like she's sitting on the like by her window kind of thing. Um, there's like an emotional, I don't know what it is, but like there's a certain there's like a very deep mine of feeling and experience there. Like Carole King, for example, she's written so many great songs, like even for
Yeah.
the Ronettes and all that stuff, right?
Mhm.
Will you still love me tomorrow and whatever. It's just like that kind of stuff of loss and connection that I think you get to a little bit later in the song with your brother and stuff. Um, it's very like it's a language all of its own, right? That even that little subgenre of music is its own language because you can meet someone at a party, you've never met them, you don't know anything about them, and for some reason a song letter comes up and you both connect. It's like, oh, that's that, isn't that a lyric from that song, um, but yeah, that's it's a really good way to connect people, and that's one of your gifts. That's something that you do is you're able to kind of recalibrate the vibration of people who are actually listening to you. Like I've heard you more like when you did your Facebook live stuff where you're interpreting and just asking for people to come up with suggestions of songs to cover, and you would just you have such an amazing jukebox of classic songs and songs that you love that maybe other people haven't heard, which if you ever have an opportunity to listen to Danielle on her on if they're still available, do it because it's really cool. But yeah, this is a whole other side of you where the muses are doing their thing through you, and it's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
At Honey Bunch, I'm glad that you brought up the Facebook lives and the covers because it took me back to the conversation that we had when you were a guest in my Living in a Spiritual Universe Facebook group. I can't even remember now if it was pre-COVID or not. No, I think it was just like that was
During.
the first summer. I think that was the first summer.
Mhm.
And where I think it was in that conversation where you talked about your love of covers and how, well, actually I'm not going to, could you speak to that, because I thought it was so interesting when you talked about why covering someone else's music brings you so much joy and so much
Mhm.
value. It we just you had such a It was just so interesting to listen to. So I would and the only other thing before you do that, I just want to say I really listened to the lyrics in that song and I wrote down the, sort of the refrain. But I just love being so how I'm drawn in to your music. I am just pulled in because there is this grace that just flows through as your voice, which is so crystal clear and so beautiful and just so resonant. just like cascades and flows along with just this easy, playing guitar that is going on at the same time. It's very contemplative to me, the way that you sing and that you play, almost sort of like the way that you speak, and that you just sort of, think and marinate and chew on stuff as you're speaking. And that was a song where I did get the references of the musicians, so yay. But it just, there's this contemplative vibe and sense that you have, or that I pick up on. And I just, it's beautiful, and I just love it. So anyway, so I just wanted to say that. But yeah, if you could speak to why you love playing other people's music so much, when there are so many bands out there who are like, one, we get to where we are by covering other people's music, but then we got to write our own music because that's how we got to, move forward in life. So yeah.
Thanks. Well, it's a very interesting subject because um, I think I feel extremely passionate about covers. And sometimes I also feel a bit like I hide behind them a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think that I need to invest, like, especially when you have, like, I don't think I need to think about that too much in a way, because I think there's room for everything. There's room for me to write, there's room for me to do covers. They're both amazing. Go for it. Covers is how I have made my living as a musician. So there's that in my experience and my ideas around commercial music. It's a reality. However, I don't want that reality to live in me. Um, but yeah, like, people come up and then they hear me, and I think often they want to, it's kind of like, I think when they've heard me play a song they love, and maybe they hear me play a couple songs they love in a live setting, and I'll go up and I'll speak to them because I can tell they're really enjoying it, and I'll connect with them and I'll say, how are you doing? I can tell you're really liking the music. Is there anything else I can play for you? And often people will say, well, what's your favorite song? And I'll say, it sounds very put on. It sounds very cheesy, but actually my favorite song is your favorite song, because I get great, uh, what is it? It makes me feel very valued and very connected to people when I can do something for them that makes them feel really good.
Yeah.
Like it makes me feel like I'm in service. And it also is like, I don't play music I don't like. Like, if people are like, can you play this song? And I don't know it, it's because I haven't learned it, probably because I don't love it.
Right.
So anything that people ask me for that I can play, I inherently love. It's just built into it. And I also feel like, I love content. It's really, really interesting for me to think about the dissemination of music from, let's say, like, popular music being, like, it used to be pre-radio, that popular music was disseminated in sheet music. Everybody could play the piano, and there would be a hit song, and the way that that hit song would flow into the world would be a sheet music would be printed, and it would be profitable enough for sheet music to be printed, and then that song would become popular because people would play it and sing it because they didn't have radios.
Yeah.
Which is like an amazing thing to think about. I love thinking about how household entertainment systems is like, it used to be that every household had a piano.
Yeah.
And then it used to be that every household had a television. And now every household has a computer.
Yeah.
It's like, it's moved, and it's all, music has flowed through all of those things and other things too. But just going back to why I brought this up was because as music progressed and it became distributed, and industry got involved and shaped that, there were times when there was only certain places where you could hear music, and therefore certain kinds of music would certain songs would become very popular regionally, and it had to do a lot with radio, the way that radio was distributed, and then that had to do with listener support. And so there was a symbiotic relationship with the region that the music was coming out of, and what listeners would listen to. There was segregation in music until there wasn't. And then, you know, popular, like, large record companies would invest in their artists. That's why we all know who the Beatles are, Fleetwood Mac, Bruce Springsteen, all these household names. Now it's not like that.
Yeah.
And so there's still huge pop artists, but I'd say the dissemination, the kind of like the way that music is distributed, the huge global pop artists are the only like artists that are distributed in the same way they used to be and have that kind of reach. And so this is all tying back to why I like covers, is because at a certain time they were huge unification pieces culturally. They were touchstones. Like, why in that song, Glenn, I can reference Tapestry. That album was massive, and I can reference the Mamas and the Papas. Everyone knows, like, or so many people know what that is, but like today's young people, like, they don't have that kind of collective attention
Mm-hmm.
where they would share lyrics, where they could, everyone could be like, you just call out my name and wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. It's like they don't have that. So when I love covers, it also has to do with going into a public space and singing a song where I can bring so many people together in a moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's not something I can do with my original music. It's different. It has nothing to do with the hierarchy, but it's very, like people like listening to like Sweet Emotion or something in a room at the right time, or just like in a movie or something. It's so evocative, and I think the power that it has of when people know something collectively. That's one of the reasons I love covers. So yeah,
Yeah.
sort of a long answer, but
Oh, that's a great answer. I mean, some of the words that I circled were how you feel, valued and connected, and like you're in service. And as someone who has been in an audience, in a tiny club or in a stadium, um, when I get to hear a song that I know that everybody else in the room knows, and unless you're all there to see like the same band because you love that band, if it's a cover, the way that you're talking about it, it does exactly that. It brings everybody together. It's this incredible unifying force, like you said. And I just and at the same time, even though it's bringing everyone together, you still remain in service and you remain in integrity, to who you are as a musician, because you bring your own spin, onto that piece that you love, as well, because you said that you don't play music that you don't like. And so it just, it brings everyone in the room together. It connects you with everyone. Everyone is interconnected in this, literally in harmony, right, of the music. So whew, nice.
That I mean, I have one of my favorite playlists I listen to on my phone uh, is a covers playlist,
mm-hmm.
and it's like when you hear someone sing a song and then they put such a great amount of their own energy into it, and it kind of zooms off onto its own orbit. What is this? This is not even the original song, and you almost you'd like it better. Those rare things where you just like,
Oh yeah.
wow, this is like the one of them I have on here is Stevie Wonder singing "We Can Work It Out," the Beatles song, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
so like punchy, and it's just like it it's joyous. It's just like it's an amazing thing. It just becomes like an entirely different song,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the same song. but he just reframes it, and um, and similarly with Donny Hathaway singing the John Lennon song "Jealous Guy," which is
I love
sublime.
that song.
It's a live version, and it's just like the organ just becomes the heartbeat kind of throb of the song.
Mm.
It's beautiful, and it's almost like he sort of peppers John Lennon's words into this music that is him, you know. So
Yeah.
it's not his words, but he has his own essence, which is his music, and then he samples this. He's using all of John Lennon's words, but it's just like it's just there. Last night I watched the
Get Back.
Get Back documentary,
Hmm.
and
Seen that.
we which is anyway, it's a whole other thing with Lassie and the Beatles, but um, hearing John Lennon sing like these early versions of the songs being crafted, like um,
Mm.
there's a version of I think George Harrison. There's an early sort of peppering of one of his songs that became later something else, but this is the same with John Lennon. He starts I think it's credited as on was it on the road to something. It's a completely different song, and then it becomes "Jealous Guy." It becomes a John Lennon song after the Beatles split up, right? Um, and it's just like just hearing those guys do their thing, and then throw out so much of what they did when they first started it, and it
Mm.
becomes like even the song "Get Back." It starts as a protest song, and then becomes like this weird Journey song or whatever, like a Journey, not a song by Journey, but um,
I love Get Back.
yeah,
um, yeah, like it's, I mean, the other thing that when you talk about covers, is just like seeing someone's individuality. Like it's like if a cover song were like a vessel or a template.
yeah,
It's like hearing different people express themselves through it and how different a
mm,
song can be when it is sung differently is also like really exciting to me. Like it's like, like I um one song, like actually there's, because we're talking about covers now, there's a podcast called Strong Songs. Don't know if you've ever heard of it. But I listened to two, or maybe it's 1.5 episodes, probably just the first. I know that he can't remember where he's based out of, but he has some really rich podcasts devoted to covers, and it's a really 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 well done
mm.
analysis.
Mm.
and
Wow,
and and I'm going to use one of the examples that was on the show, which is a Tears for Fears song, "Mad World."
yeah,
Um, and the original version, in fact, I'll use two examples. The original version is very produced and of its time. Um, in the 80s, it's very synthed up. There's a lot of like rhythmic sequencing, and it's very energetic. Um, and there's a cover done for the movie Donnie Darko. And this cover was very, very famous. And it's just this guy, just him on piano,
yeah,
and there's like a little bit of instrumentation to it, but the somberness of it, and um, it's so bleak, and so different from the original, and they're both extremely beautiful, and just have a
yeah,
really, like, they conjure up such different feelings. The other example I'll use, just because it was so good on the show, which is a song a lot of us know and love, is the Rolling Stones "Satisfaction." We know what that is. Just a classic, perfect rock and roll song.
yeah,
And then how Devo
yep.
came along and just
Can't get me no. Yeah,
deconstructed it, and like made it into be like something, like, probably it was more even about the genre of music at the time than it was perhaps about the the message of the song.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But the way it's talked about on that podcast is really great, really exciting, and a good example. I think it really expounds upon what we're talking about. And interestingly, Mick Jagger had to they invited Mick Jagger to sign off on the Devo cover just to make sure it was like it was accepted because it was so out, like far out,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, and
Right.
of the time. But this is a really good example of, like, you know, the song being the fixed piece,
Yeah.
and then other people coming in and, you
Yeah.
know, changing it in a way to even like mark the time,
Hmm.
you know, like mark what's going on in the world at that time, mark what production styles are popular and what kind of instruments are happening, and just
Mhm.
what is that time saying, you know, what is 1987 or what is like 1993 or what is, you know, what are we talking about, you know.
Yeah. Wow, that's I'm gonna listen to that. I'm not as huge a podcast listener as Glenn is, but I would love to listen to that specific episode of that. That sounds
I'll send it to
fantastic.
you, it's worth it,
Okay.
it's really worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. Then
Um,
there's the whole other thing of people who, the most famous songs, the most famous version of the song is not by the original person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it takes someone else to make it a chart hit. Like, um, Nielsen, everybody's talking the Fred Neil song. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just, and again, when you go and hear the original, it's like, wow, this is awesome in its own way. But we
Mm-hmm.
become very, like you were saying about radio, just sort of massaging what people, um, what's acceptable, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just have to do a little bit of digging. So I guess it's these podcasts are good tools that we have now to
Oh yeah,
dig deeper, right?
it's so fascinating.
Man, oh
Mm-hmm.
the song Valerie comes to mind for me, Amy
Oh
Winehouse song.
yeah, yeah,
man.
yeah.
Really,
The,
and it was so funny because I mean, we listened to Amy Winehouse, but I had heard the Zooton song numerous times because there was a time where we spent a lot of time listening to BBC Six Music,
Mm.
and that was our radio, and it was such a great tune. And then she came along and covered it and made it, even better. And she got way, way, way more, traction with it than they ever did. But it just, there are people who had no idea who the Zootons were because they'd heard it done by Amy Winehouse, and it was her
Mm-hmm.
song.
and that the story was that they were they're a band playing in London. They're from Liverpool, but they're playing in London. Amy Winehouse's like local bar, pub, whatever. They were playing there a lot, so they became like one of her favorite bands, right?
Mm.
So when she brought that song to Mark Ronson when he did that album
Yeah.
version with all these different singers, um, he was like, yeah, this is no good. Like, I don't like it. It's not. She tried it. She did a couple of. So they did these versions of it, and then just it wasn't working. And for some reason, he just after the band, the Daptones he had with him, to put all their instruments away. He's like, just try it slightly different way and whatever. And they did two takes of that, and then that's one of them became the hit, right?
Nice. Hmm.
Just way different from the original, but
Yeah, it's so fascinating how you can reinterpret stuff. um I mean, soft cell, Tainted Love,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
being also a Motown hit
yeah.
previously.
Well, um, it okay. So they're interesting because they did the chart hit in Britain was "Tainted Love" slash the Supreme song. I'm blanking. What is it? Anyway, one of the Supreme songs. So it became
Mm.
like a two for one. But "Tainted Love" is by Gloria Jones, who was married to um, Mark Bolan, T Rex, right? So that was her like hit. Like it was more like a Motown,
Yeah.
like a Northern Soul song. Like it was a big
Mm-hmm.
song in the dance clubs,
Yeah.
But it wasn't. But when Soft Cell put those things together, it just became like, wow, what is this? And
Yeah.
it just turned people
Well,
on to Motown and stuff.
totally different versions, like really both totally
Where did our
strong.
love go? Right, that's the song. Where did our love go?
Hmm. Interesting. I haven't heard that one by Soft Cell.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just like
I remember
it's like
looking
a
in, yeah.
12-inch remix thing, but it's just like the two songs put together, slowed
Huh.
down the beat. It's amazing.
Yeah. I remember looking into Soft Cell after that, and I didn't really like, there wasn't something that
Yeah.
really like
Yeah.
grabbed me
Yeah.
beyond that. But
Yeah.
yeah, just another good
Well,
example of a cover.
Stay Hello, Wave Goodbye was their biggest original hit, I think.
Oh, okay.
Which is worth checking out. It's a beautiful
All
song.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, well, with all this talk of covers, how I wish that you could play a cover for us, but that's not
Yeah.
possible because of copyright issues. So if you were gonna
Oh,
play, yeah, if you were like, a couple of people
that's too
might hear
bad.
it and then it would get yanked off of YouTube because we don't have the rights, for you to play it.
Hmm.
So we've been talking for about an hour and a half, a little bit more. And so I'm wondering, do you have another song in you that you would like to share with us before we start to kind of wrap things up?
Or not.
I actually like don't really feel like I have something that
Okay.
would be appropriate
All
or
right.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Glenn, and you'll be able to like tell people in a bit, but I mean, you have been performing live recently, right? You're not just
Yep.
on Facebook anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's correct. I actually haven't been on Facebook for a little while, even though I miss it in a lot of ways. Um, yeah, I'd love to get back. I think I got a little distracted because I wanted to develop being on Twitch a little bit. And then I found that making that leap kind
Mm-hmm.
of challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But online performance is something that I find to be very, very interesting
Mm-hmm.
and something I really enjoy for what it is. Um, More recently, I because I'm based in Victoria, as you guys are, I play at the Empress Hotel. I play at the Irish Times pub. I've been playing a lot up in Shawnigan Lake at this place called the Lake House. And I play wherever I can appear. Sometimes I get gigs at Herman's Jazz Club. Sometimes um, I might have a show coming up on the 25th of March. Um, I'm not sure if it's going to be solo or with my band at this point. And that'll be at the James Bay United Church. So I'm going to be on March 6th. I think that's next weekend. I'll be appearing at the Center for Spiritual Living again during their service. So, you know, I I have certain places where I get to appear more or less regularly at this point, and I'm very hopeful about um, that growing.
Lovely.
Nice.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah,
one thing just I can ask, I mean, we weren't able to be there, but just recently at Herman's, didn't you do, was it a Joni Mitchell night?
I
Yeah.
did, and that's something that I really want to get back to developing. Um, and It was a tribute to Joni Mitchell, and it was very, very well received. I sold out the show with my band, and it was a dream come true. Joni Mitchell is a huge inspiration for me. So I really hope to be presenting that again in Victoria. The title of the project is Miles of Isles, which is a nod to the name of one of Joni's live albums. Um, yeah, I would encourage you if you're in Victoria and you can see that popping up in any promotion, called Miles of Isles. And I look forward to developing it.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, now we're going to, before we totally wrap things up, move into a sort of more fun, light little segment called a super rapid fire question round, where Glenn is going to bombard you with a bunch of neat little groovy questions for 1 minute. You just answer
Okay.
top of mind, whatever comes to mind, no deep thought or contemplation here. And it's just a way for us and our listeners to get to know you just a little bit better. So,
Okay.
Honey Bunch, are
And-
you at the ready with your
And
questions?
just one thing, bear in mind that some of these things may be very difficult to answer, so just pick one. They're impossible, some of them.
But they're
Okay.
fun. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
All right. On your mark, get set, go.
Okay, Danielle, how many tattoos do you have?
2.
Okay. And then which do you prefer, Dolly or Joni?
So hard. I can't. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Okay. Funny friends or honest friends?
Honest friends. Oh, but it's so hard.
Um,
Both. Both.
both.
No
Okay.
problem.
Being
Yeah.
invisible or be able to fly?
Fly.
Okay. Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Solo singing or with the band?
Both.
Ask for help or go it alone?
Both.
Showers or baths?
Baths.
Oh, bicycles or cars?
Oh, bicycles.
Forgetting or forgiving?
Forgiving.
Swearing or hitting pillow?
What?
To get rid of anger, you swear or you hit a pillow?
I swear.
Okay.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, Glenn,
I love
tell
that.
Danielle
What?
what she's won.
Okay. Well, you've won from the book Embers by Richard Wagamese.
Oh, thank you.
An excerpt from.
One Ojibwe's meditation. Actually, two, because one of them is short. First, he says, "It seems to me the act of being spiritual is simply the act of allowing myself to feel my spirit move. It's not a huge ideological or theological process. It's just opening myself to living and allowing myself to absorb and to be absorbed at the same time. That means I can find creator in a blues run, a dance sequence, a conversation, a baby's laugh, the sound of the wind in the trees, and the immaculate silence of an empty room in the stillness of dawn. Like now, here on the 18th floor of a hotel with the sky a seeming foot away from my face." And then finally he says, and this is the last page of the book, "To tell, to use the act of breathing to shape air into sounds that take on the context of language that lifts and transports those who hear it, takes them beyond what they think and know and feel, and empowers them to think and feel and know even more. We're all storytellers, really. That's what we do. That is our power as human beings. Not to tell people how to think and feel and therefore know, but through our stories, allow them to discover questions within themselves. Turn off your TV and your devices and talk to each other. Share stories. Be joined, transported, and transformed."
Lovely.
I don't know why, but that's our gift to you today.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Honey Bunch, for those lovely Richard Wagamese quotes. Thank you, Danielle Lebeau Petersen, for being here today. You've already mentioned some live stuff that is coming up for you. If someone wanted to learn more about you, find more about who you are, where you're playing, just, what is it that Danielle Lebeau Petersen shows up as in this world? Where could they go?
Just find me on social media
Okay.
under Danielle Lebeau Petersen on Facebook and Instagram. This is where I do my promotion and where I notify people for upcoming gigs.
All right. Fantastic. We will have a slide up so that whoever's watching on YouTube can see that slide, and it'll also be in the description for the podcast. So thank you so much for being our super special guest today. It was so awesome to hang out with you for a couple of hours. Thank you, Honey Bunch, for co-steering the ship as always. And thank you everyone for watching, for listening, however it is that you are engaging with us and this podcast. We are so grateful for your time and presence. Our guest today has been the super amazing singer, songwriter, and deep contemplative thinker, Danielle Lebeau Petersen. My name is Lassia. I have been your host. Glenn Sheridan has been my co-host. This has been another episode of Who Do You Think You Are? And there will be another brand spanking new episode coming up in about 2 weeks. All right. Thanks for now. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Goodbye.
This has been an episode of Who Do You Think You Are? An exploration into how our thoughts, beliefs, and feelings create our reality. My name is Lassia Cahoot, and I have been your host. My co-host has been Glenn Sheridan. We'd like to thank the following for helping make this podcast a reality. Today's special guest, Danielle Lebeau Petersen. Music, Vasco Lorenco copyright, 123rf.com. Background illustration, Sakma Sterke copyright, 123rf.com. For more information on this podcast and our Lassia Cahoot Soul Excavator, please visit www.lassiacahoot.com. If you like what you've heard, please like, subscribe, and or let us know by leaving a comment. Thanks for tuning into Who Do You Think You Are?